This is your moment. This is where it happens. This is where your story changes. This is where you decide to take action. This is where you become the solution. This is where you see lives changed. This is where you are changed. This is where adventurous entrepreneurs go. Love people, go places, change lives. Let's get after it. The question you've got to ask yourself is, what am I meant to solve? What big, hairy, audacious problem are you meant to solve? In your city, in your community, in your country, in your world, what are you meant to solve? And once you answer that question, nothing can stop you. It's time to stop floating down the river of life, just taking whatever comes your way. It's time to live out the dream that's been placed inside of you all along. Start that thing, make that change, take that action, just go. There's just too much at stake and too many lives waiting for you to stay comfortable.
Welcome to Impact Junkie.
Welcome to Impact Junkie.
Impact Junkie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Impact Junkie Show, where we are loving people, we are going places, and we are changing lives. And I'm so happy to welcome to the IJ Show my very good friend, Joe Pasqualichio. Joe, welcome to the IJ Show.
Thanks, Philip. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I'm pumped to be here with you today.
Man, so you all are in for a treat today. You're going to hear Joe's story. We're going to dig deep into, the love people, go places, change lives. We're going to dig into the chapters. And Joe is a portfolio manager at a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund in New York City. He is one of the most brilliant finance men I know, and we have some funny stories we'll share about how I learned that. We talk a lot about God nods, and Joe's one of those people in my life that it's truly a God nod that he came along, that our lives have overlapped, and he's one of those amazing characters in my story. And he's also investment advisor for Impact Junkie, and has not just impacted my life, but so many other Impact Junkies, and is doing amazing work, which we're going to dig into. And one more fun fact that you're going to learn about today is we actually met at Harvard and did grad school together and served together on student government. A lot of amazing stories and a lot of fun times together there as well. And so Joe, before we dig into your story, talk a little bit about the work you're doing now and where you are and what you're doing in the finance world.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm at Schonfield Strategic Advisors. I'm a portfolio manager in the public equity space. I mainly focus on TMT sector, which is technology, media, and telecom. Also covers software, entertainment, and things tangential to that. So it's a super fast-paced, exciting space where things are changing every single day. So it keeps you on your toes. Our job is simply to go find great investments and produce outsized returns in the marketplace. And so it's exciting to go through the news every single day, uncover new stories, and make the best possible investments we can.
So, Joe, you are a wizard with spreadsheets. You are a man. And there's a funny story I'll tell about Harvard in one of our classes that I just don't know. He walked out of this test. Well, I guess I'll tell it now.
Oh.
So we were in the same class together, investment management class. And this one problem, I was struggling with the problem set, and Joe was like the first one out of the classroom. And I messaged him and I was like, man, that was tough, wasn't it? Wasn't that tough? And he's like, that was a breeze. It was no problem whatsoever. And Joe is also the kind of guy that we were trying to make a decision on a ski trip. And Joe, to give you the level of decision making and how he can pull emotion out of his investment decisions, actually pulled together this beautiful spreadsheet of all the options weighing us on this ski trip, which I think is just such a great little snippet. But we say we are a network of entrepreneurs and investors hooked on solving these big, hairy, audacious problems in the world, right? So for those who may not be as familiar with the investment world, and before we dig into your story, can you talk a little bit about the different ways that people can go in the investment world and different options that are out there?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, Philip. I mean, there are a million options out there on how to invest, and there's a couple core ones that you typically see, coming out of a business school, environment where we met. One popular place to go, obviously, is where I'm at now, which is hedge fund or public market equity. Mutual funds would fall under that category as well, and we could talk about the differences between those. The other popular places to go are private equity and venture capital. So, they're all a little bit different. Venture capital tends to be newer companies, either very early seed stage or companies who are on round 1, 2, 3 of their investment cycle. So pretty early stage companies, they're looking for capital. They may or may not have a proven product or service yet. Maybe it's just a concept or a management team with an idea or a problem that they want to tackle. So it could be that early stage, or it could be someone with a product, but it hasn't been marketed or distributed. It's not sold or on shelves yet. So there's a few different stages. There's early stage and later stage venture capital. Those are private investments. They're not open to everybody like the public markets when you're investing in public equity. And then there's also private equity, which I mentioned, which is very similar to venture capital. The difference is it tends to be later stage, companies that are more fleshed out and fully developed. Sometimes companies that are even at late, very late cycle, very mature companies, and somebody's looking to, reinvent the company or improve cost structure or monetize the business in some way, now that it's more mature. So the checks are usually a little bigger in private equity compared to venture capital. So you tend to do much bigger deals. But again, those are both private. They're not open to everybody out there. There are some really cool platforms out there, trying to allow people like us to go out there and invest in these venture capital and private equity deals, whether it's through crowdsourcing or other means, which I find very interesting. But public equity, what I do, it's kind of cool to talk about because actually everybody at home can also invest in the same stocks that I do. And so it's really neat to be able to talk to people about it because they can, it affects their lives. They probably have a 401k account or, another brokerage account. And it's kind of, the news flow that impacts the stock market is something that everybody can discuss and kind of understand. So it's fun to be in that part of the business.
Cool. And I know, like, some people, they hear about hedge funds or something they've seen in the news, and we're going to talk about how you ended up here at a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund managing portfolio manager, which is epic. But before we dig into your chapters, your scenes of your movie, so I also wanted to talk a little bit about the shift you're seeing around impact in the investment space and this sort of desire that we've had a lot of conversations and worked with a lot of investors, both from the investor standpoint, the entrepreneur standpoint, and business owner and startup, the founders, and the customer, kind of the whole kind of spectrum, if you will, sort of seeing this shift towards impact.
It's huge. I mean, it is a major force. Certainly, it comes up all the time. When I first started, in the investment industry, there weren't a lot of discussions around it. It was out there, but now you're seeing it every single day. I'm getting emails, phone calls. You're hearing about it. It's a part of the investment world now that's not going away, and it's only getting bigger. There are a lot of investors who only want to invest in what they call ESG, socially responsible investing. They won't invest in any companies that aren't fitting certain criteria.
Break out for those that don't know, talk the acronym, the ESG. Sorry.
Yeah, environmental, social, and governance. So they're looking at all of the different parts of the responsible investing chain and saying, is this a company that I want to invest in? And everybody's criteria are a little bit different, but they all kind of follow the same pattern. Are these companies respecting our environment? Are they socially responsible? Do they have good governance and management? And if they don't, that might be a red flag for risk in that company down the road. And it's not something a lot of these investors want to tolerate. So, for example, it might be a company that maybe a casino, right, gambling, or it could be a firearms company, or maybe a company that heavily pollutes into the environment to make whatever product or service they're offering. So that's a huge part of the public investing space. And then on top of that, there's a lot of investors who want to expand their portfolio to include impact investing. They want to know that their dollar is not only making a return, but it's also making a difference in the world. And that's becoming a much bigger piece of the equation as well. And there's not as many funds out there or opportunities to do that. And so it's really interesting to see the growth in that emerge over time. I think if we talked about this 10 years from now, we would look back on it and realize we're just in the first inning or very early stages of what's going to happen here.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know we've had lots of conversations with investors as well that maybe had a lot of money, have done well financially, but there's still that desire, like that hunger of like, what is it all for, right? Yeah, right. You need a lot of money, got all the cars and all the houses, but something's missing, and there's that desire to see that it's once you get to it, down to it, money is not just the goal. The end of this is not just to have the biggest amount of most amount of money, but what have you done with that, and how have you impacted lives in a positive way, right? I know we're hearing that a lot.
It's a great point, and I know people being in the hedge fund industry, there are a lot of people who have been singularly focused on just making the most amount of money possible. It is something that happens. But I won't say anybody personally, but I do know people who have made a lot of money and they have the home and the vacation home and the other vacation home, and they have all of the cars. And at the end of the day, when you're trying to accumulate all of that, it may feel like you're on a mission. But once you actually get there and you kind of get to the finish line, it's very kind of hollow. You're like, well, what do I do now? What's next? Right? Because you haven't fulfilled the desire that you have. You thought that stuff would actually, give you that fulfillment, but it doesn't, because, at the end of the day, you haven't created anything with it. It's just stuff that's sitting there. You can enjoy it, but it gets old and it doesn't provide a lasting fulfillment. So I think there are a lot of investors out there, whether it's their full-time job or something they're doing, aside from their full-time job, that want exposure to use their mind and their skills, but to place them into somewhere where there is impact. And I think that's where a lot of people get more fulfillment from.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's such there's a lot of awe with the position that you're in, like that a lot of people are striving, a lot of people trying to get into MBA programs and trying to, work their way up and strive and to be where you are and to do the work that you're doing. And it's so awesome, Joe, that you're not just satisfied with that, but you're working to change the world and to use your skill. We say, do more with what you've been given, right? That's one of the biggest things we talk about, and start something that changes lives. And so, man, you have such an awesome knowledge set, a set of experiences and gifts, man, that is really special. And to use those skills to change lives and to impact the world is awesome. So let's talk about this. Let's dig into your story. Y'all know, if you've been through our core IJ programs, we start with you and understanding your story, the chapters of your life, not just the what you did, but why you did that, and helping you to uncover your big, hairy, audacious problem So Joe, take us on a little journey with you. Let's start, and I may ask you to go in depth a bit more, but go and start wherever you'd like, but to walk us through your journey.
Sure, thanks. I've always wanted to write a book, so maybe this will be
We'll start it right here.
a rough draft. Yeah, so I grew up in the Niagara Falls, New York, area of the country. It was a great place to grow up as a kid. I remember going to the falls. It was basically 5-10 minute drive from where I lived, so it felt like it's a natural wonder of the world, but it's in my backyard. So it was a really cool place to grow up. And my parents, their parents had come over from overseas. They were second generation, I'm third. And we weren't business. We weren't we weren't plugged into like the business world, and like my dad didn't, his grandfather didn't go to Harvard. It's kind of like we're plugged into that world. So, where I am today is miles away from where I was then. But it was a foundation that was really important to build all of your reasons why, right? And the first thing I noticed growing up, in terms of developing a professional skill set, was I was very good at math and science. It just came to me naturally. I was always well ahead in those subjects compared to where I should have been. Wish I was as good in the other ones as well, but those were the ones that stood out. And the guidance counselors, they say, well, you're good at math and science, you have to be an engineer. And so that's kind of they push you in that direction. Like there's probably 10,000 careers where if you're good at math and science, you can excel. But when you're in high school, there's probably like 5 careers they push you into. You're either like a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, like it's right. I did go to school for engineering. That I started out looking for the best engineering schools I can go to. What are the top? I got the books, all of the top 10 engineering schools, and all of the online rankings and US News and World Report, and where do I go to the best possible engineering school? And a funny thing happened after interviewing and applying to dozens of schools and really taking it seriously. I had it down to like a top 3. And as I was deciding, a letter came in the mail from the University of Pittsburgh. It was a very short application, I'll say, compared to the other ones. They made it very easy for me. And, my father was like, well, you should just fill it out. Like, I know you're deciding between these 3 top engineering schools, probably go to one of them, but, they sent this to you, they waived the fee, just fill it out. So I filled it out thinking like, my dad's making me waste some time, but whatever, I'll fill it out, make him happy. And then they sent me a letter back and they were like, hey, we were really impressed with your application. Can you come visit? And so I was like, all right, well, we have a relative in Pittsburgh, why not? We'll go down, visit our relative in Pittsburgh and check out the school. And when I got there, I was just blown away. I had been to dozens of other schools, like top tier engineering schools. But when I got to Pitt, I was just blown away. The campus was beautiful. The people I met were like just so engaged and so ready to talk about not just engineering or just about everything in life. And it was clear that there was a different tone, and the extracurricular activities that you could join, and the options to kind of enrich yourself outside of the classroom were just overwhelming. And so I thought it was the best place to go. After all of this time spent, months and months and months spent, whittling down which engineering school I should go to, I went to Pitt. And it turned out to be an amazing decision. Not for the reasons I thought at first, but because of all the things I wound up doing there outside of the classroom. I did do very well in engineering while I was there, but I had an experience on student government. So I thought it was really cool that there was a student government. I went to a meeting on kind of an off chance. I think they sent probably an email to all the freshmen saying, hey, if you're interested in student government, come to this meeting. So I went, and I just thought it was really cool the way Pitt did it. They had a president, 8 board members, and this group determined how millions of dollars of student activity fee money would be spent at the university. And they also engaged with the chancellor of the university, the deans of the different schools, and civic leaders in the community to kind of determine a lot of the policies that would happen on campus and off campus in the community. And you were able to give the student perspective and kind of influence those. And so I thought it was just a really awesome thing to get involved with. And so I joined, a committee It was kind of I just joined a committee. I think it was academic affairs. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly. It was a long time ago, but I think I joined the academic affairs committee, which you could just sign up for. And that wound up leading, to me eventually running for a board seat, one of the 8 board seats. And I was on the board for 2 years. And then my final year at Pitt, I ran for student body president. And it was a crazy election. I think there were more people running that year than there had been in the past. So it was super, super stressful. I can only imagine what our real elected leaders go through during a campaign, because I thought it was like a war. But
what led you to that, like putting your name in to run for president? Like, what was the motivation or your thinking? Or because it didn't sound like you kind of were drawn to that initially. I mean, maybe you were, but
seeing what you could do with that opportunity, and all the people you could meet, and all of the lives you could interact with, and all of the changes you could make, it just seemed like such an amazing, unique position. And so, having spent, essentially 3 years on the student government, in learning all about how it works, I felt like I had the skills and the best, the best knowledge base to be president of the student government. And so I did really feel like I would be the best person for the role at the time, which I think is important. I believed that I would do a good job in that role, and that the other students, at the university respected what I had done so far in student government. And so, it made sense. But I had some tough competitors, so it could have gone another way, but I'm glad it didn't.
Cool. So you're at Pitt. So you finished your undergrad.
That's right.
Then what happened?
That's right. Well, that experience really changed my trajectory, because before that, I was going to go out and be an engineer. I had done internships at some of, the largest, U.S. engineering companies. I had done a few internships at government agencies as well, and with engineering. And, they were fine, but it felt like something was missing. And, that student government experience really was energizing for me. And so I thought, maybe there's something I could do in the business world that looks a little more like student government, where I'm kind of going from place to place, trying to help solve problems, in the on-campus and off-campus community. And it kind of, I actually literally, this actually happened. I typed, how do I go around from place to place making things better as a career? I think I typed it into like Google, like back in like 2007 or something.
You were searching back then. You're like, how do I love people, go places, and change lives?
Basically, yes. And Google spit out management consulting. I had never heard of the term before, and I was like, what's this management consulting? And so I learned about, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Booz Allen, group that, you learn about when you're researching management consulting. And I thought this is really neat. You get to fly all over the country or world, and you get to work on really cool, exciting problems for different companies. And every day is kind of different, and different challenges arise, and you work on different projects with different people and different teams, and it just seems super exciting. So, I wound up getting a job at Booz Allen Hamilton out of school, and started my career as a management consultant. And so that's kind of how that happened. So, I think at each turn so far, and like, what I've been mentioning to you, there's been, something that changed the trajectory of what I was going to do. So it's been interesting how that's happened.
Can you talk a little bit about how you felt about the consulting and this path that you were on? So all of us are kind of like on this journey, and, things change over time. And one thing we thought was the way it was supposed to be turns out like, this is why I went through that. I'm picking up these skills and all this, but there's something else I'm headed to. And a lot of us have that sort of drive to keep pushing, like, okay, there's more. I mean, can you talk about, like, I think there's a moment that you kind of had that with the consulting, right? To kind of shift to your next phase of life.
Yeah, well, there's two parts. One, Booz Allen at the time was going through a situation where the government side and the private side were splitting apart. I'm not sure if it was Carlyle Group. I might have that wrong, but I think it was someone like Carlyle Group, if not them, was taking over a piece of it, and the rest was gonna, it was gonna be separated. And so I I wound up having my entire role shifted to something different when that happened, and didn't really love, what I was doing at that point. And I luckily was able to get another job at a different consulting firm, which I enjoyed a lot more. But still, after doing it for 3 years, it just didn't feel, I wasn't super excited about it. I did love the work. I did love the people, especially. And it was cool to travel around and be on these different projects, but it wasn't hitting the passion point for me at that time. And so it kind of came back to me, like, what's going on with that investing, that I had always thought about in the back of my head, but I didn't really know how to do it professionally, but I was very interested personally. And it was actually right around, the financial crisis was taking place right around this time.
That's a perfect time to get into finance.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like the market is on sale and there's chaos going on. And, if you believe in the long-term durability and success of the world economy and the U.S. economy, then, it's a great time to get involved. And so, that was happening at this time when I was, getting ready to apply to business school. And so that investment came back up, and I said, how do I need to go do this. And everybody I talked to said, go back to business school, reset what you're doing and go make your investment career happen that you want. So I did. I went back to business school. I applied to Harvard Business School and was lucky enough to get in. And, instantly, like day one at Harvard, you're just bombarded by these amazing companies globally who want to come and talk to you and maybe give you an opportunity to come work with them. And that opportunity is just priceless. And so it was great to, have that visibility and then to have all the resources at the university to kind of say, hey, like this is what investing is. Like, as we talked about earlier on in the show, what are the different types of investing? Why are they different? Which one would you like to do? Now that you've identified that, how do you go out there and make it happen? And, that was a learning process. I actually spent my first summer internship at Morgan Stanley on what they call the sell side, writing research reports that are read by investors, and really enjoyed it. It was great. I learned a lot. And I said,
wait. You just skipped past Harvard. Like, you skipped over the Philip Harding connection.
That's a long conversation. So I don't know if we were ready for that.
Before we even go there, you just kind of skipped over and then I got into Harvard Business School, which is like a really big thing that we could spend, like people do. That's all they do is just talk about how to apply, how to prepare, how to spend years of your life just creating your applications. And so
I spent like a month of, because I actually, when I was sitting there in my consulting role and the financial crisis was happening, and when I finally got around to deciding I wanted to apply to business school, I actually realized there was only a month before the round 2 deadline. And if you know anything about business schools, there's usually like 3 rounds, and they say the 3rd round, your chances are lower. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have a month to do this round 2 application. I hadn't even taken the GMAT yet. So I had to study for that, take the exam, write the essays, do all that. So I actually didn't apply to many schools just because I didn't have time. I figured if I didn't get into one, then I would, expand the scope for the following year. But luckily it didn't have to. But yeah, it happened very quickly. So I probably should have spent years planning this out.
So it was how close before the 2nd round deadline?
It was about a month.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe a little.
I'm trying to get people to like you on the show, and I think a lot of people are disliking you by hearing you say that after spending years of their life trying to prepare the perfect application. That's amazing.
Well, what was nice is they forced you to have a very low word count on the essays, so you actually can't write that much. I actually think I spent most of my time cutting back wording. That was like the time consuming activity. It was like, how do I tell this this story in 200 words?
GMAT. You just are like, I'll go take the GMAT as well. The GMAT test, if you don't know, is like an epic test that you don't just wake up one day and say, I'll go take the GMAT. Unless you're Joe, I guess you might.
That's all I did for like a month. Every minute. I
don't think you're completely human. I think you're part cyborg or something.
Netflix streaming wasn't really what it is today. So I didn't have, there were there were not as many distractions. So I was able to spend every night.
Signed up for the GMAT within like just a couple of weeks. Like, I mean, you can't even sign up that fast to like get the test. You got to book it in advance and go to the testing center and all that.
As long as they have room.
You just did it.
I actually took it was kind of during the holidays, and so I actually remember I took it. I was visiting my family. I was visiting my family back home during the holidays, and I actually took the test at a testing center where my family lived. So, you know, I was working in Philadelphia at the time, and my family was back in Niagara Falls area. So I actually was back for the holidays and found a testing center back there and took it there. Wow.
So there's a lot to unpack here. So much to unpack. We're gonna have to do multiple episodes here because there's a lot of gold nuggets that you're dropping along the road. And there's a whole episode we'll have to do on our connection at Harvard, which is so great as well. And the fact that we almost didn't connect, and the fact that you were running for Harvard-wide student president the first time I met you, and I didn't even know who you were, and I actually voted for somebody else because I didn't know who you were.
I know that, and it still hurts to hear.
And we went out to eat. This is a short little story, but we went out after, and it was you who had just elected president, another former Harvard-wide grad student president, and then later I would be elected student president a couple of years later. And we went out, and I remember being still like kind of self-conscious of like, well, all these people like Joe that are like so smart, right? And I remember saying something about, I felt this call to government and higher public service and maybe running for Congress someday. And that seemed so scary to say out loud. And we were sitting in this little restaurant in Harvard Square, and there's the conversation, what are you going to do next? And this whole thing. And I said, well, maybe someday I'll run for Congress. And I kind of said it soft and mumbled, and instantly you and the other Aaron, said, me too. Like it was no big deal. And in that moment, I thought how it really had an impact on me about how our own mentality we can hold ourselves back.
Absolutely.
And it's just anyway, there's a lot to unpack there. And then there are some campaign videos that you recorded that at some point we should do a live viewing of those. And
I don't know.
Hot take of those.
We don't have to.
So Joe, it was a pivotal thing that our lives came together.
Right.
It was really special. And it was one of those God nods for sure. So there's a lot to unpack there that we'll get into over time. You'll have to hang out with us more, come to more IJ events to pull all the stories out. But so I was still finishing up. Actually, we kind of overlapped. And so now you're off. So let's talk a little bit about your journey here, this transition in the finance world.
Yeah, well, like I said, it took place at the business school. I remember a guy who sat next to me in my first year classes said he was going to a mutual fund information session where they basically tell you who they are, why you might want to work there. I had no idea what I was doing when I went there. I thought, I've heard of this firm. I think my dad might use them. He might use it as like a savings and trading account. Like I don't, what am I going to do there? Am I going to help people open up trading accounts? And I kind of understand, oh, wow, there's portfolio managers there that are managing billions of dollars and creating stock portfolios, trying to outperform the market. That's really, and it was kind of eye-opening. Wow, this whole world is out there. And so that got me started doing research about mutual funds, hedge funds, who they are, how they're different. And, like I said, I did the summer at Morgan Stanley on the sell side, which is, providing research reports to what they call the buy side, which are the investors putting capital to work. And, through that, learned a lot more about, what the opportunity set was. And so by the time it came to, apply for full-time jobs coming out of business school, I had an opportunity to go work for a mutual fund in Boston, very, very old, mutual fund has been established for, a very long period of time. Got to learn from people who had been doing it for decades, long-term investors who want to find the highest quality companies that are going to outperform, for 5, 10 plus years to come. And, very, very interesting work, very great place to learn. how to invest in public markets. And so, that was a great experience. I loved having that time to really, work on an idea that you have in that setting, because it is a long only setting, which is what they say. They don't short stocks. They're only buying stocks. They tend to have, somewhat concentrated portfolios and, tend to make long investments. So when you do make an investment, it's going to be in there for maybe 5, 10 more years. And so a lot of work goes into that investment decision. And, you're not making a ton of investments in each sector. You're making a couple. So they have to really count. And so it's super exciting to do that work and make that decision.
And you were working with a lot of these like Fortune 100 company CEOs were coming in and trying to get you, like, to pitch you why you should be buying their stock and where they were headed. And I remember some of the conversations. I don't know if you could share all of them, but that was quite an experience.
Yeah, it was. I think my first or second week on the job, Randall Stevenson, who was the CEO of AT&T at the time, was coming into the office, and I was covering the telecom sector, was one of my coverage areas. And so, I found myself within a week or two of joining, being in a room with one of America's biggest CEOs, being responsible to kind of ask him questions and find out more about the company and whether it's a good investment, for my firm. So it was amazing. Oh my God, I'm sitting, the guy, he was a very, very tall guy. And, we were at this little table, and I think his legs, were like all the way through the table. And I was like trying to not hit him and making sure he's comfortable. Cause I was like, whoa, I can't believe that they're letting me, interview Randall Stevenson here after being here a week. So, it was a great experience. And I wound up, over the time I was there, I wound up meeting the CEO, CFO, and other C-suite members of just about every major US telecom and media company, publicly traded. And so, it's quite a privilege to be able to, sit across from these people, learn from these people, ask them questions and hear their answers.
What was what were a couple of things that maybe surprised you about those meetings with some of these CEOs? Was there anything that I didn't expect it to feel that way, or I thought it would be different? Was there anything that stands out to you from those?
Well, they're incredibly smart, people, and, they all have a passion for what they do, and, they all love their companies and, want to present them in the best light. And so, I guess one of the things you learn as an investor, you want to ask positive questions, right? But there's also concerns that you might have. And so, talking through the concerns, there's a way to do that, where they're happy to kind of say, hey, these are some risks with our company. Here's what we're doing to address them. I found everybody to be very down to earth, for the most part. Not everybody. There's some characters out there, but really want the investors to understand their business and feel comfortable about making an investment. And they've been very generous with their time. And
I remember you showing. I don't know. You showed me, but the reports, like the 5K or what the other reports that come out, and there would be one footnote on page 37 that you would have some very specific question about this footnote that would really make people nervous and kind of.
It's funny that you remember that. Yeah, that's right. That's true. I mean, that was one of the benefits of working in that environment is, the time to really dig deep into each company. But yeah, I would find, footnotes, and I would, oh, that's really interesting. Nobody's talking about this. That actually really matters for this company. How is that not something people are talking about? And then in these meetings, I'm able to say, hey, what does this mean? Why did you put that there? And kind of flesh that out a bit. And yeah, sometimes people were pretty shocked that, you saw that, that wasn't meant to be noticed. That was meant to just kind of go by.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Interesting. So so through your journey, you've got exposed, man, it's so interesting how this journey has opened up for you to, having this sort of this theme developing at an early age, and just they kind of feels like you kind of went away from the path. I know a lot of people, feel that oh, I've kind of gone off track of what I originally, and have this sort of moment of that's right. That's what I felt. And then realizing all these dots along the way that have been connecting you to where you are. And you've had such a diverse set of experiences in finance. So kind of walk us through some highlights to where you are now at a multi-billion dollar hedge fund. in New York?
Yeah, sure. So, I think, I loved what I was doing at the mutual fund. But, some hedge funds had been calling saying, hey, we heard, you're doing well at this mutual fund. You've been recommended by, people in the industry. We'd love to pitch you why you should come over and work at a hedge fund. And ultimately, some of the changes, are, they will let you as a very young analyst potentially manage money where you're making the actual investment decisions, timing, sizing, how big is this investment going to be? When are we going to make it? When are we going to get out of it? So having the control over that, and that was very appealing. Hedge funds are much faster moving. So rather than making a 5 to 10 year investment, which you'll see at a mutual fund, a lot of hedge funds are making much shorter term investments. It could be a multi-year investment, but it may be a much shorter term investment. So the turnover is a little faster, and you're also shorting stocks in a lot of cases, which is a totally different concept. A lot of people misunderstand the practice of shorting a stock, but the reason we do it is for risk management. So we're trying to take less market risk, where a lot of people are okay with the market going up and down. They get that that's kind of how it works. At a hedge fund, you're trying to make absolute returns every single year. And so just because the market went down, you're still trying to make money, positive returns. And so shorting stocks takes some of the market risk out of the equation. And you're trying to focus on generating what they call alpha, which is kind of a return separate from beta, which would be like the market's return. So, the focus of the hedge fund is really trying to drive that and not just make money on the fact that the market was going up in any given period of time.
That's great. I was going to ask you to go into it without going too deep into portfolio theory and all of this to give people a sense. And you walked right up, you tiptoed right to the edge, and then you backed away. I saw you do it.
I'm ready to bust out some equations. Let's go.
Oh man, I love it. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is education and helping get you where you are. And still, obviously, the journey's still unfolding, but there's some in the VCs or in the entrepreneur space or investment space that are saying like, school's not what it's all about. And especially higher education, you don't need to go to college, or even paying people to not go to college, right? To say like, we'll start something. You need to start something and get real world experience. What do you kind of say to that, given your experience and where you are?
Well, look, first of all, I don't think there's one right way to do things, right? So, everybody's journey is going to look a little different, and, what's right for me or right for you or right for the next person is not the right way to do it. So I guess I'd start out by just saying, I would never tell anybody that you have to go to graduate school, or, you shouldn't go to graduate school. You should just go straight to work after high school. There is no one path that it could be made. Success can be made a lot of different ways depending on the circumstances. For me, getting an education was crucial. I didn't really know like what my passion ultimately is. I didn't know how to do that professionally. I didn't have a concept of being able to do that. And the education allowed me to find that passion. Being an engineer gave me critical problem solving skills, that I developed in my undergraduate career. That I use every day in the investment world, building those spreadsheets you talked about earlier. But yeah, for me, it was crucial just to develop the problem solving skills, to make the connections. I mean, the people you meet at these universities, through your extracurricular work, especially, really changes your life, to develop you as a person, professionally, how to work with other people. That's all stuff you don't necessarily think about when you think about just getting a piece of paper that says, you're now a bachelor of, whatever, engineering. In my case, I have a degree in engineering. So, it was super valuable. And then even after that undergraduate experience, I had no clue how the business world worked, and going to business school just was like, like, this is how all of these things are interconnected: government agencies, nonprofits, banks, operating companies. How do they all work together? What's the ecosystem look like? And it just opens up that world, and it changes your mind on what you can do in life and how you can make an impact.
Speaking of impact, can you talk us through a couple of, I know you have some stories in your life that have kind of helped inform, your view of using investment as a sustainable way to bring change into the world. And maybe you can share a couple of those highlights throughout your journey that have kind of helped you even believe even stronger in the power of investment to make an impact.
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I really think that investing to make an impact can build a more sustainable impact over time, one that grows and changes the landscape for the better, compared to just pure, charity or donation, if you will, that does solve an immediate need, but doesn't really solve a long-term problem. You kind of go right back to the same place, or in some cases, you wind up making things worse. By helping out in the near term, you actually make things worse in the long term. And I first came across that, when I was helping, deliver food to families in need in my local church community. We had a pantry, and we would get food donations, and we were trying to connect with families in the area that might need food assistance for whatever reason, and hook them up with food to get them through their weeks and months. And it was interesting to meet those families. A lot of people find themselves in need suddenly out of nowhere, just because of life circumstances, and you get to understand, not everybody who's in need is there because they did something wrong. Like, a lot of times life just hits you. So it was a real honor to be able to kind of help out. But when I would get to the homes, there was a time when I had a truck full of food. It was a flatbed truck, totally open, exposed. I'd pull up to a driveway, and I'm bringing 2 bags of food to a family, and all of a sudden, all the neighbors came out of the woodwork. They knew who I was. They saw the truck. They saw the food. And they started approaching and trying to take the bags out, and thought that it was a free for all. Like, I was just bringing food, take it if you want it. And I'm trying to explain to them, hey, this is all marked for families who have already requested it. Like, everything's prepackaged based on family size and need. Like, you can't take this. You can absolutely sign up and apply. We'll try to help you. Mm-hmm. And you just saw that there was a real problem out there, but people expected the food to be given to them, every single week. But it hit me that there was no solution really, or there was no second wave where we were going to try to help these people find their way out on their own. It was just continuously an expectation that we'll be there week after week to give them these goods. And for that reason, it became an entitlement.
Yeah. And obviously there's emergency situations, but you're right. When it's easy to get sort of lulled into that from both sides, right? From it can feel good to give, right? In the short term.
It does, yeah.
It feel good and hey, I'm a good person. And
that's right.
It feels good to the receiver, but you go beyond the emergency once you move out of that. I mean, we see this whether it's international aid or local community charities you're talking about as well, that we could actually become part of the problem, right?
We can absolutely be. I mean, for sure. I mean, if you know this food is coming week after week after week, there's no immediate need to come up with a long-term solution. And then one day, when that food runs out, or there's too many people requesting and you overwhelm the food bank, you're turning families down. There's jealousy amongst neighbors when they see somebody getting a shipment and they can't get one. And you realize there's a much bigger problem here that needs to be solved.
So in a world that you are living in and, conquering mountains in, yep. And that's so driven by absolute return. And what's the number? What's your number or whatever? Yeah. And do you believe that there's space for impact in that, to be in the conversation? How can we help? I know you mentioned you're seeing a big shift in that space. Do you feel like that's going to become part of the equation? We obviously work a lot on impact measurement and and bringing those measurements in besides just absolute financial return investment. I mean, do you really believe that's possible?
I do, and to touch on, what you said first. Yeah. Like for me, when you're not engaging in impact, right? When you're just investing for profit, it starts over every year. It's very, what have you done for me lately? If you made money last year, but this year you're not doing so well, people will very quickly walk away from you, right? It's constantly producing a return year after year after year. And every January 1st, it just starts over again. Go do it again, right? Like there's no lasting impact to what you're doing. So it's a good point that you brought up. And then, like I said, going forward, I think that impact will be a bigger and bigger piece of the investing world. And, you kind of made the comment, well, it's not just profit. So are people okay with that? You're doing things that are not purely profit motivated. But I actually think from a risk standpoint, when you're making an impact investment, you're making an investment in something that's helping the community. And I think there's less risk associated with that than when you're making an investment that might be damaging the community.
Unpack that a little bit.
Well, when you think about, there's things that about a company today, but then there's a lot of unknowns, right? Like they come across as headlines, news stories. It might be something, legislation was passed to stop something, and that hurt this company and the stock's down a lot. Or, there was poor management in place and it turned out, there was some fraudulent activity at this company and hurts the stock price. And so, when you ignore the, sustainability and impact, pieces of the equation, you're actually exposing yourselves to risks that you're not even really thinking about. Not traditional financial risks that you can calculate, with traditional valuation metrics, but things that can be identified and realize maybe I don't want to play in that space because there's a lot of risks. It could be in energy, right, where a lot of these companies are having a negative impact on the environment. Right? Could there be an oil spill that damages the company? Could there be laws passed in different countries which limits their extraction of resources? Right? Those are all risks that you might not think about today, but if you were kind of focused on, the environmental and social impacts of the investments you're making, you might have avoided those risks. And so I'm not sure that those risks are fully baked in to the asset prices today. But I think as people identify more and more of these metrics and they become kind of a factor in your risk model, the market should weight some of these more impactful investments higher and assign them a higher valuation.
So it's moving from just, oh, that's a nice thing to do, to this is vital to the future of our organization as well.
That's right. I think people are starting to realize that there is a correlation between returns and social corporate responsibility and sustainability, and they're interrelated, and companies should get a premium for doing that and declaring those metrics and making them available to everybody.
Awesome. So wrapping up this session, a couple of last questions is both from an entrepreneur perspective and an investor perspective, and you can answer this however you'd like, if you'd like to combine it or answer them separately. What kind of advice might you give in this space specifically to an entrepreneur or a founder who's looking for investment and would be talking to investors, and then both also to a potential investor who's looking to invest in either the impact space or be part of funds or what have you? What kind of advice might you give to them?
Well,
future impact junkies that are coming along.
Sure. Well, I'll start out with some general advice, right, which has been helpful to me. I mean, there's been so many moments in my education and career where people have told me that something couldn't be done, right? You can't do that. That's too much, or that's it's unlikely to happen. Don't bother trying. And I can go into a few of those, but in each of those moments, rejecting that and saying, what, I'm going to make it happen, and just holding on a little longer than other people are willing to, can make all the difference in the world, right? There was a recruiter who came to Harvard Business School, I think my first year, and I said, hey, you're recruiting for hedge fund roles. I think that's really interesting. Can you put me in front of some companies I'd really like to interview? and they looked at my resume. They talked to me about my background. They said, you know what, you don't have a chance. Like you'll never work at a hedge fund. You know, don't bother applying. You know, go back to consulting. That's what you did before. You know, that's what you know. Go back and do that. I'm like, wow, like I'm at one of the greatest business schools in the world, and I have somebody telling me, you know, don't even try. It was shocking, and you know, obviously, I didn't listen to that advice one bit. But there's people like that who will kind of try to steer you away from your goals or tell you something can't be done. You know, I had a professor in high school who said, you know, you'll never go to such and such university, and you know, he was wrong. And so people will kind of, you know, I had somebody tell me, you know, you can't be student government president and still achieve, you know, a 4.0. It's too time consuming, right? Like wrong. You know, you are ultimately the person who decides whether you can or can't do something. And, you know, a lot of people who are very talented either get kind of, you know, influenced by these naysayers, if you want to call them that, or, you know, they just give up because something's too hard and they eventually just give up, say it can't be done, you know, I'll do something else. And that leaves a lot of opportunities for people who can dream big and kind of, you know, hang on and give it one more shot when everybody else kind of went home and quit. There's a lot of opportunities for those people.
Man, that's great advice. And that's right on track with why we spend so much time starting with you, right? And understanding your passion, purpose, and calling, the BHAP that you're meant to solve. So when you hit those hard days, you know it's rooted in something deeper, and your life is about something bigger than just this job or this thing. It's something bigger that you're working towards, and that you fight to get up, you fight to push on. And in fact, when someone says it can't be done, it kind of gets you excited. Right?
It does. I mean, for me, I think those are like the most motivating words.
Oh man, Joe, this is awesome. There's a lot more. We're going to keep the conversation going, but this is thank you for being so open and sharing your story. And Joe is one of our awesome, like I mentioned, he's an investment advisor working with IJ on so many different projects. And you got to spend more time with him if you're fortunate enough to do that. And there's a lot more. We just covered the surface here, but thanks, Joe, for your time. So glad to have you, man.
Yeah, Philip, this was great. I mean, I can't wait to see you in person again. You know, all of these online calls and Zoom meetings today are great, but you know, I'm really looking forward to
oh man,
the real world again.
Absolutely. All right, we got to close it out. We got to do our big X shot here. So we got to close it out with some X's. Woo! Love people, go places. Love people, go places, change lives, everybody. We'll see ya. Peace.
Thanks, Philip.